name is Ernest Miller. I'm a chef, a historian, and educator. I specialize in California food history. I love California food history because California is the greatest food region in the world. So the tomato is a New World crop. And by the way, the New World has all the awesome crops. Before Columbus and the Spanish began colonizing the New World, the rest of the world didn't know about chilies, corn, potatoes, and of course, and you may not think of California as much of a tomato country, but people just don't realize that California grows 1/3 of the world's canned tomatoes. 99% of the canned tomatoes grown in the United States are grown in California. And we are the ones who gave the mechanically harvestable tomato to the rest of the world. Now, of course, your fresh tomatoes, are hand-picked and packed. That's very labor-intensive. Makes them expensive. They also have to pick them unripe. They're not very flavorful because they have to ship and all this other thing. Well, California realized that that's just not an economic way of doing it. So starting in the 1950s and into the 1960s, researchers with the University of California began working on a mechanically harvestable tomato, meaning a tomato that can be harvested by machine and then can then be packed and shipped. They worked on it for a number of years, but by the 1960s they have invented the mechanically harvestable tomato, which had a number of advantages. Number one, the tomatoes are harvested ripe, so they're at the peak of flavor. They're harvested by machine, meaning that much less labor intensive, so we can gather many more tomatoes much less expensively. And then what happens is these tomatoes are very often at the peak of flavor, are then quickly packed into cans in a whole variety of ways. Within 7 years, the entire California tomato industry switched from hand picking to mechanically harvested tomatoes developed by the University of California, Riverside. And so these tomatoes are at their peak of flavor. A writer for the New York Times, Mr. Mark Bittman, came and visited a California tomato farm a few years ago. And he was expecting to be unimpressed because he'd been to some of the tomato farms, say in Florida, where the tomatoes are picked unripe and they just don't taste very good. But he picked some of these tomatoes just before they were harvested with machine. He said, these are some of the best tomatoes I've ever tasted. And they're going to go right into a can where their freshness and their flavor will be preserved. And so when I say that California grows 99% of the canned tomatoes in the United States, whether it's canned whole tomatoes, marinara sauce, pizza sauce, or even ketchup, we've probably grown here in California. Now, you may be familiar with Heinz ketchup. And they have a beautiful label that's the Keystone shape because they're from the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. But they famously say that their ketchup is grown, not made. Well, where do you think they're growing it? California, with seeds that they've developed based on the seeds developed by the University of California. So when you're eating canned tomatoes, be proud. These are delicious. They're fantastic. They're a great way of doing tomatoes. As a matter of fact, without canned tomatoes, tomatoes would not have been popular in Italian cuisine until tomatoes came to Italy less than 300 years ago, and they were a seasonal, regional crop down in southern Italy. It's not until they invented the way to can tomatoes that they were able to use canned tomatoes year-round and ship them throughout Italy, so that they could become an important part of Italian cuisine. And now California has improved the process. And again, 1/3 of the world's canned tomatoes come from California. Be proud.